Dermatopathological Summit by Parsons Derma and Wisdom Path Lab. I welcome you all this evening. And now I request Mr. Partho Paul, MD Parsons Derma, to kindly introduce our chief speaker, Dr. Shubhra Daur.
6 o'clock.
Good evening, dear doctors. I welcome you all to the second Dermatopathological Summit initiated by Parsons Derma and Wisdom Path Lab. Today's topic is clinical dermatopathological correlation of interesting cases. Our dermatopathology expert, Dr. Shubhra Daur, will spearhead the subject along with her esteemed team of eminent panelists, Professor Dr. Kaushik Lahiri, Professor Dr. Sudip Ghosh, Associate Professor Dr. Abhishek De, Dr. Shayantani Chakraborty, Dr. Aarti Sarda, Dr. Sukarna Banerjee, and Dr. Shomaduti Chanda. We look forward to a very lively and interactive session in the next 90 minutes. The cases showcased here have been processed at Wisdom Path Lab, Kolkata. Wisdom Path Lab is a Parsons Derma initiative that aims at providing evidence-based dermatology. Wisdom Path Lab is led by Dr. Shubhra Daur, our chief pathologist, who is renowned for her slides and expertise on the subject. She has been a faculty on the subject of dermatopathology in several academic platforms. She has several publications in national and international journals to her name. Presently, along with heading Wisdom Path Lab, Dr. Shubhra Daur is also the Eastern Coordinator for the Dermatopathology Society of India. Now, without further ado, I would like to request our chief speaker of the day, Dr. Shubhra Daur, to take over the session. Over to you, Dr. Shubhra Daur.
Thank you, Partho, for that nice, kind introduction. Good evening, friends. Welcome to another exciting session of clinical pathological correlation of interesting dermatological cases. At the very outset, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Mr. Partho Paul, MD of Parsons Derma, Orpita De, Business Head Wisdom, and Mr. Shonjit Ghosh of Parsons Derma team for their support in organizing this excellent knowledge feast. Today, we have lined up 8 interesting cases, and I have along with me 7 eminent dermatologists, as already mentioned by Mr. Paul, with me today, who are going to show you the clinical aspects. A warm welcome to Dr. Kaushik Lahiri, Dr. Sudip Ghosh, Dr. Abhishek De, Dr. Shayantani Chakraborty, Dr. Aarti Sarda, Dr. Sukarna Banerjee, and Dr. Shomaduti Chanda. So first of all, we are going to share the clinical aspects of the cases. The dermatologists are going to show you the clinical aspects of the cases. After that, there will be an audience poll. We want to make it very participatory. The results of the poll will be declared after 20 to 25 seconds, within which you have to submit your answers. After that, I shall show you the histopathological features. Comments and queries are welcome in the chat box or in the Q&A sections. And if anyone wishes to speak, please let us know in the chat box. And before we proceed, I'm very proud to say that all the wonderful work that will be showcased today has been accomplished at Wisdom Path Lab, which is situated in the premises of Wisdom Center in Jodhpur, at Jodhpur Park. The machines are all of Leica make. They are the #1 brand in histopathology. And I'm very proud to share with you that we have also started the immunofluorescence section, where we have a very wonderful Carl Zeiss make microscope for interpreting the direct immunofluorescence tests that we have started doing. So with that, let us start with the first case. Dr. Kaushik Lahiri, please. Let me first start the screen sharing. Kaushik, are you there? Can all of you see my screen?
Ma'am, your screen is still not visible.
It's not visible?
No, ma'am.
Is
Yes,
it
ma'am.
visible?
Yes,
Is it
ma'am.
visible
It is.
now?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay. Kaushik has joined.
We'll just check, ma'am. Give me a moment. No, ma'am, I believe because of probably network issues, he has not been able to.
Okay, then I'll present the clinical aspect. A 68-year-old female presented with discrete erythematous papulovesicular lesions over chest, thigh, and distal extremities for a duration of 3 months. These are the lesions. They were associated with itching and burning sensation over the distal extremities. You can see here on the leg, on the foot, and one on the finger. This lesion is excoriated. She also had oral erosions and superficial ulcers on her tongue. So can we have the audience poll? We thought this was a case of erythema multiforme. Let's see what the histopathology showed. Okay. Hope the screen is visible nicely.
Yeah.
This is a scanner view of the skin biopsy that I received in the lab. And in the scanner view itself, it is obvious that we are dealing with a case of interface dermatitis. This is the epidermis and this is the dermis, and lot of activity at the dermoepidermal junction. We will have look at the higher power views now. Here you can see this is the epidermis. There is some hyperkeratosis, which is mostly orthokeratotic in nature. The normal basilar keratinocytes are not present in epidermis. It is completely lost. The normal palisaded arrangement of basilar keratinocytes is completely lost over here. You have some fracture lines, thin fracture lines, what I call the fracture lines within the epidermis. See, subepidermal fracture lines somewhere, at some places they are intraepidermal. There is a lot of inflammatory cell infiltrate at the dermoepidermal junction. We will see what this inflammatory infiltrate is composed of. This is the lower end of the epidermis. And what is quite obvious in this slide is the vacuolar degeneration. All of you can appreciate the vacuolar degeneration. At some places, there are tiny vesicle formations. Here, it has extended to form a tiny vesicle just at the dermoepidermal junction. And the inflammatory infiltrate is mainly composed of lymphocytes. There is a mixture of some histiocytes. Histiocytes can be differentiated from other cells because of their vesicular nucleus. See, the nucleus has a pale appearance, whereas the lymphocytic nuclei is very dark in color, and you cannot appreciate any cytoplasm around this nuclei. So this is a lymphocyte. All these are lymphocytes. This is a histiocyte. And another important feature is illustrated in this slide. The lymphocytes are exhibiting epidermotropism, which means that they have a tendency to cross over into the epidermis. This is a lymphocyte which has tagged itself to the lower border of the epidermis. Here there is one lymphocyte, here there is another. Okay, we move to the next slide. Again, this is the papillary dermal region where you can appreciate the dilated blood vessels, and there are inflammatory cells around the blood vessel. This is one blood vessel which is showing prominent endothelial lining. This is a lumen of the blood vessel, and it is lined by endothelial cells which appear swollen, and the infiltrate is present in the perivascular areas. We move to slightly the lower part of the dermis, just below the papillary region, that is, where you can see that the infiltrate is both perivascular as well as interstitial. It is present within the collagenous interstitium. You can also see one eosinophil over here. However, eosinophils were very scant in this case. I want you to focus on these two cells in the epidermis. They are exhibiting one important phenomena called apoptosis, which is a means of programmed cell death. The cell becomes small in size, the nucleus becomes hypnotic, and the cytoplasm condenses around the nucleus. Eventually, the nucleus will be lost, only the cytoplasmic shell will be left, which is known as cytoid body or apoptotic body. And the fractal lines, I was calling them fractal lines. It is a term that I was using. It is not mentioned in books. See, these are the lines that have appeared in the epidermis. They are not normally present in a normal skin, but here they have formed because of confluent necrosis. What is the meaning of confluent necrosis? Adjacent keratinocytes have necrosed to form small vesicles. Very characteristic vesicles. See the linear spread, the linear extent of the vesicle at the lower border of the epidermis. So this is the last of the histopathologic slides of this case. And most of you, oh no, we have another slide. Another important feature is being exhibited over here. You see a lot of extravasated RBCs. Do you see these eosinophilic stained round cells without any nucleus? These are extravasated RBCs, which is also very characteristic of this condition. Combining all these features, as most of you said, the diagnosis was erythema multiforme. Erythema multiforme is a self-limiting disease. It is important to perform a biopsy to rule out other differential diagnoses like bullous disorders. Bullous pemphigoid was a differential diagnosis in this case. The prognosis of this disease is very good and treatment is very rewarding for the clinician. So question and answers are welcome. Queries are welcome.
So chat box, if you could check.
Yes. M. Shahena to all vasculitis has written vasculitis. You want to know whether there is vasculitis? Yes, there is some degree of lymphocytic vasculitis in erythema multiforme. Any other questions? Well, the question answer section is not showing any questions over here.
Ma'am, there is one in the chat box. Please
Okay.
check.
I'll check. How to differentiate from melanocyte artifact from incipient vacuolar degeneration? Okay. When there is actual vacuolar degeneration, there is melanin dropout into the dermis, and you will find that there are melanophages. I think there were some melanophages. Can I go back and show you the melanophage over there? You can see here one pigmented one cell which is showing pigment in its cytoplasm. So when a melanophage is nothing but a histiocyte. When there is melanin dropout into the dermis, the histiocyte comes and tries to engulf it and forms a melanophage. A cell which has engulfed melanin is known as a melanophage. This is another melanophage. So when there is vacuolar degeneration in the basilar keratinocytes, it is always accompanied by melanophages in the dermis. Artifacts are not accompanied by melanophages in the dermis. And a melanocyte can have vacuolated cytoplasm, but they are regularly placed within the in the row of basilar keratinocytes. Is that clear? Does that answer you? I hope that clears your doubt.
Ma'am, there's a question in the Q&A section.
Also, another point in favor of vacuolar degeneration is that the normal basilar arrangement, the palisaded row of basilar keratinocytes is lost when there is vacuolar degeneration, which is not there in case of artifact. Another question in the Q&A section. Why not hand and mouth disease? Okay. Hand, foot and mouth, you meant. That is not accompanied by this dermal inflammation, which is a very significant part of erythema multiforme. Hand, foot, and mouth disease is caused by the Coxsackie virus, and it is common in children. And it does not have these characteristic histopathological features that we just now saw. And clinically, I don't think it comes in the differential diagnosis. Those lesions are present in clusters and usually present only on the extremities. Whereas this patient had lesions on the trunk as well as the extremities. Okay, we go on to the next case now. We go on to the next case. Next two cases will be shown by Dr. Sudeep Ghosh.
Next. So the first case is initially seen and evaluated by Dr. Somojyoti Raichodhuri, and in his absence, I am going to present this case. Next. This is a story of a 39-year-old man. Next. Who presented with asymptomatic swelling of upper lip for the preceding 6 months. And there was it was persistent throughout the day, and there was no systemic symptom like fever, urinary complaints, dysentery, blood in the stool, cough, or respiratory distress. It was not accompanied by atopic manifestations, swelling at any other site, and the swelling did not subside with antihistamines prescribed by the local physician. Next. And this is the clinical picture. There is swelling, slight furrowing. Previous one, please. There is swelling, furrowing, and slightly edematous and erythematous lesion in the inner side of the lip. So you can appreciate the gross swelling. On examination revealed, there is indurated swelling on the upper lip with focal fissuring. There was no tenderness. The mucosal surface was edematous and hyperemic. There are no ulcer or discharge. The nasal mucosa, floor of the mouth, throat, teeth, and tongue all are within normal limit. And there was no facial nerve palsy, and systemic examination was non-contributory.
Can we have the audience poll now? Maximum people think it is granulomatous cheilitis. a 4 millimeter punch biopsy was received in the lab, and this is what it showed. Epidermis and dermis, the dermis showing lot of infiltrate which is extending throughout the thickness of the dermis. You can appreciate some ectatic blood vessels in the lower dermis. So aggregates of inflammatory cells, they are present mainly in perivascular areas. Here you can see that they have come and infiltrated the subcutaneous fat even. See the ectatic blood vessels. Most of them are lymphocytes. There is an admixture of histiocytes. At some places, see these pale staining areas, these are histiocytes, collection of histiocytes, and around them there are lymphocytes. And you can also appreciate these elongated blood vessels. Lymphocytes mostly in perivascular areas. There is admixture of some plasma cells are also present, but they are not very dominant in this slide. Occasional plasma cells. Here also there's a nice plasma cell. You can recognize a plasma cell by the presence of its eccentric nucleus. And there was a tendency to slight granuloma formation, loose type of circumscription, slight granuloma formation, though I didn't find any foreign body giant cell in this case. Again, there is an attempt to form a giant cell, multinucleate giant cell, not well formed though. And there is a circumscription over here. Another circumscribed collection of lymphocytes and histiocytes, ectatic blood vessel. So with that, a diagnosis of granulomatous cheilitis was rendered. Differential diagnosis of granulomatous cheilitis actually includes plenty of conditions like tuberculosis, Melkersson-Rosenthal syndrome, sarcoidosis, Crohn's disease. Special stains should be done wherever possible, and as in all dermatological cases, a good CPC will help in arriving at a correct diagnosis. In fact, when I saw this case, I was strongly rooting for Melkersson-Rosenthal syndrome. Sometimes lip swelling can be a monosymptomatic marker for this syndrome, but in our case, a follow-up revealed the actual etiology. Dr. Sudeep, please elaborate.
Then further investigation revealed that chest X-ray there is some tuberculous focus in the apex of the right lung, and HSCT also is corroborative of the chest X-ray finding, and a 5-TU MANTU test is strongly positive. The patient is still under investigation, and a tuberculous etiology is suspected in this particular patient.
Okay. So when I saw that this patient had a primary focus in the lung, I went ahead and did a ZN stain, but it was non-contributory in this case. I did not find any AFB. Probably this granulomatous cheilitis represents a hypersensitivity reaction. It is a tuberculid actually. It is a reaction to the primary focus in the lung. So we can address the question and answers now. Okay. No question and answers. We move to the next case then.
Ma'am, there is a question in the question and answer section.
Okay. No caseation. Yes, no caseation. Good observation. There was no caseation in my case. If tuberculid, which type is it? I don't understand. What do you mean by which type? Can you elaborate? Granulomatous cheilitis is more common on lower lip. It can occur on either lips. It can occur on either lips, bilateral. Here in this case, particularly, we had bilateral swelling of lips. Okay. What type of granuloma is present, ma'am? Naked or cuffed? It is actually cuffed because lot of lymphocytes are present. Well, in this case, actually granuloma themselves were not quite prominent. And a naked granuloma is a term which is used chiefly in sarcoidosis, where you see the granuloma is composed chiefly of epithelioid cells without any accompanying lymphocytes. In this case, there were a lot of lymphocytes. We move on to the next case then. Dr. Sudeep.
Our next patient is a middle-aged man who presented with thickened skin with tiny bumps on his different parts of his body. Next. So a 50-year-old man, decorator by occupation, presented from rural Bengal. He presented with multiple non-itchy skin bumps, which started over the nape of the neck and gradually progressed to involve the entire upper back and for the last 2 years. There was also associated tightness and thickening of the skin, started from the head, neck, and face region, which gradually progressed to involve entire body and upper and lower limb up to the knee level. And this is present for the last 6 months. Next. He has associated decreased mobility of the face and fingers. There is a history of episodic urticarial eruption, and there is difficulty in opening the mouth, and he has dysphagia to solid foods for the last 3 months. Next. There was no history of Raynaud's phenomenon, diabetes, thyroid disease, trauma, hypertension, or recent weight loss. Past history, family history, personal history, and treatment history was non-contributory. Next. Now, on clinical examination, the patient had multiple discrete, non-tender, skin-colored fawn papules over the nape of the neck and sides of the neck, pinna, and upper back. And there's a characteristic parallel ridges are evident. The papules are distributed in a typical parallel ridges pattern. Next slide, please. Next. Next. You can previous one, please. So you can appreciate the parallel ridges evident over the chest. The papules are distributed in a parallel ridges pattern. And in the back of the ear, there is indurated thickening of the skin. Near the axilla also, there is redundant skin folds. Next. So mucocutaneous examination revealed there is generalized tightness and induration involving the head, neck, face region, whole of the trunk, both upper and lower extremity up to the level of knee. There is indurated skin folds, difficult mouth opening, and there is difficulty in retracting the lower eyelids. And nail fold capillaries are, however, normal on dermoscopic examination. Next one. So you can appreciate the thickening of the skin. The skin is indurated and thickened over the trunk, and there are some redundant folds near the axilla is evident in this picture. Next one. So there is microstomia. There is difficulty in opening the mouth, and the forehead is also infiltrated, thickened. Next one. So in this picture, you can appreciate there are multiple indurated skin folds. And this is very much analogous to the skin folds of a particular dog breed. That's why it's known as, next one.
I've already clicked.
Next one. This is known as sharp-eye sign, because there is a striking resemblance with the sharp-eye dog. Is a Chinese breed. Next one. And there is thickening and sclerodactyly like picture of the hand also. But there is no finger pad loss, or there is no stellate scar over the evident over the fingertips. Next. Next. So on systemic examination, we get a slight myopathic pattern in the proximal muscle. There is polyarthritis and sclerodactyly and ectropyme. Next. Next. Radiological examination was non-contributory, and laboratory investigation was next non-contributory.
We can have the audience poll, please.
Yeah, ma'am.
Maximum people thought it is a scleromyxedema. Let us see what the histopathology revealed. Skin biopsy was done from two sides, one from the papillary region and another from the folds. So this is what the biopsy of the papillary region revealed. Quite a square piece of biopsy, acanthosis in the epidermis, and lot of activity in the dermis. So the dermis is showing proliferation of cells. Mainly two population of cells have proliferated. Here you can appreciate the spindle cell proliferation, and there is some infiltrate in the upper dermis in the perivascular areas. It has occupied, the proliferating cells have occupied the entire depth of the dermis, and the collagen fragments appear to be, the collagen appears to be fragmented actually, and the cells are present in between the collagen fragments. This is a very typical pattern that we are seeing here. We'll go to the higher power views. Some cells look pale with prominent vesicular nucleus and prominent nucleolus. These are the histiocytoid cells, but most of the cells have a spindeloid nuclei. See the spindeloid nuclei, these are proliferating fibroblasts that we are looking at here. And there are some histiocytoid cells with pale looking nucleus. It is as if the cells are trying to insinuate between the fragments of collagen. This is typically described as interstitial granulomatous pattern. It is quite a rare pattern in this particular disease actually. Can you appreciate the histiocytes, which look as if they are trying to enter beneath the collagen fibers? And the collagen by itself looks quite pale. It doesn't look very eosinophilic. They are pale looking collagen, as if something is deposited on them or between them. The broken up collagen with insinuating cells. And this is a special stain which is eliciting the mucin, increased amount of mucin that is particularly found in this such type of cases. This is the biopsy from the fold, exaggerated folds that Dr. Sudeep was highlighting. It showed the same findings in a less exaggerated form. Interstitial granulomatous pattern. And this is a special stain, a VVG stain, to show that there is loss of elastic fibers, which is again very characteristic of this case. As most of you correctly diagnosed it, histopathologically, the diagnosis was scleromyxedema. In this case, it showed an interstitial granulomatous pattern. It is not very common in scleromyxedema. Only 10% of cases show this interstitial granuloma annulare-like pattern in scleromyxedema. It is important to be distinguished from other sclerodermoid conditions like sclerodema and scleroderma. Central to all these conditions is the pathogenic fibroblast, because it is the fibroblast that produces mucin, increased amounts of collagen, or hyperplasia of fibroblasts. So the incriminating cell is the fibroblast here. Ancillary investigations are very important. Dr. Sudeep, please.
As you all know that scleromyxedema is often associated with paraproteinemia. So we have gone for a serum protein electrophoresis, and it showed a typical M band. Next. So there is it is associated with a M spike. So we are planning for immunofixation electrophoresis right now, but at the same time the patient had suffered from COVID. So we are waiting for his recovery, and we will plan for that immunofixation test. And one small comment here, actually madam has rightly pointed out that there is progressive fibroblast proliferation, fibrosis, and mucin deposition. So it is better termed as fibromyxedema instead of scleromyxedema. The term scleromyxedema itself is to some extent misleading because it means that there is sclerosis and mucinosis. That is more of a feature of scleroderma. So
Okay.
according to histogenesis, fibromyxedema is a better terminology.
Sclerosis actually refers to the collagen. So when when collagen is more and less of fibroblasts,
So that
then
is a
that
feature
condition
of
becomes
that is
sclerodermoid.
more of a feature of scleroderma and other conditions.
Okay, we'll look at the question and answers query section, and we'll look at the chat box to see whether there are any queries.
Ma'am, Dr. Dattare wants to ask a question. Doctor is unable to write it on the in the Q&A for
Okay.
a reason,
Mhm.
so we will allow him to ask the question in person,
Mhm.
please. Mr. Shonjit, if you could please allow the doctor.
Yeah, I've asked doctor to talk. Yeah, doctor is on. You can. Yeah, Dr. Saple.
I'm sorry, I should ask. No, in about the lip swelling, what all
Mhm.
the years are there?
Okay.
I'm asking.
If
First, let me.
time permits, we will allow questions
Okay,
about the other cases. Here we are going to discuss
at the
only
end.
this
Okay,
case.
at the end. Okay, okay, okay.
If time
Thank you.
permits, at the end we will allow questions on other cases.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
We move over to the next case then?
Ma'am, you just have to answer that one, though it's not on the purview, but you just address this one.
Which
In
one?
the chat box. In the chat box, Dr. Sanjay Agarwal has asked.
Treatment. We are not going to discuss treatment which is beyond the purview of this webinar today. If you want to ask anything related to the histopathology, then I can answer that. Okay. We move on to the next case.
Even there is one question, just one
Okay.
question.
Okay. How to differentiate these three types? Three types of, you mean scleroderma, scleridema. Okay. Scleridema will have fenestrated collagen. A special stain, toluidine blue, often helps. It shows metachromatia in histopathology. And scleroderma will actually show glassy collagen fibers. You will not see any proliferating fibroblasts in scleroderma. You will see that the entire dermis is replaced by homogenized bundles of collagen. It has got a more homogeneous appearance. And the sweat glands will appear higher up in the dermis. Proliferating fibroblasts is typically a feature of scleromyxedema, not scleroderma or scleridema. We move on to the next case. Dr. Abhishek, are you ready?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you, Shubhrati, for this wonderful opportunity, and thank you everybody for joining us. So I'll present a brief case. Case is brief, but it's interesting because a lot of times, unless we have the facilities, we may miss the diagnosis. That's why possibly it's a interesting case, and we need to discuss about it a little bit more. So this is a 47-year-old female. The age is important. It's a little bit younger than normally we see this group of the patients. So 47-year-old female which presents with taints, vesicles, and blisters for about 8 months. So now patient was getting treated under a lot of doctors. The patient is also diabetic, and I did the HbA1c. It was 6.3, so kind of reasonably controlled diabetes. In dorsum of the blisters are there in the dorsum of the hands, extension of the elbow and the knee and legs. So we can see some more of the pressure-prone areas where the blisters are there. These blisters are often has an erythematous or articulated pruritic skin. So there are articulated or pruritic lesions on that top of that. The blisters are from some other places. However, the blisters are from the normal looking skin. So there are both kind of blisters are there. Next slide, please. So you can see when the patient came to me, because the patient had taken some bit of medicines, the blisters are little less, but we still found some of the active blisters, and some blisters also have pustular lesion in that. Next slide, please. And where the blisters was healing, just after a couple of days, once we have done the surgery, when we do the biopsy, and we called the patient. By the time we have started treatment, you can see the lesions are healing with scarring. There are old scarring also with the patient when he presented to us. So there are fresh blisters, few fresh blisters, and more of the everything is kind of healing with scarring. You can see the areas, it's very interesting areas. These are more pressure prone areas. These are the extension of the elbow and the knees. All those areas are more, dorsum of the hands and feet. Those are the areas it's kind of getting involved in this patient. So it's a kind of brief history. We do not need to go too much about the history. That histopathology will be interesting. So we'll talk about that later. Can you take the audience poll now?
Maximum people thought it is epidermolysis bullosa acquisita. So this is the histopathology. You can see a neat blister. The scanner view itself is revealing the blister over here. And we will see whether it is intraepidermal or subepidermal by moving in closer. Yes, clearly. You can see the basilar keratinocytes over here, compressed basilar keratinocytes, and it is a clearly subepidermal blister. Look at the extent of the blister. It is a huge blister. And you can see that there are inflammatory cells at the base of the blister. These inflammatory cells are chiefly composed of neutrophils, which are admixed with few histiocytes, lymphocytes, occasional eosinophils. You cannot really make out the eosinophils, where chiefly neutrophils are present here. And this is the inflammatory cell infiltrate that you saw within the blister lumen, and this is the dermis immediately below the blister, which is showing perivascular, chiefly lymphohistiocytic infiltrate. Mainly lymphocytes are seen over here. And this is one area which is showing spindle cells, which I showed you in the previous case. The spindle cells are nothing but fibroblasts. They're present wherever there is any scarring in the tissue. So with the histopathology, I could make a diagnosis of subepidermal blister. And we went ahead with the direct immunofluorescence of this case. A salt split technique was applied, and you can see there is brilliant floor pattern linear IgG deposition on the floor side of the blister. This is a negative IgM. And if you look carefully, you can see a weak positive immunofluorescence for IgA, again on the floor side of the blister. So with this combined histopathology and DI findings, I made a diagnosis of epidermolysis bullosa acquisita. It is very important to differentiate it from bullous pemphigoid. Histologically, differentiation is a tough call. So correlation with clinical features and a salt split direct immunofluorescence study can help differentiate. This simple schematic diagram tells us why we see the immunofluorescence on the floor side in case of EBA and on the roof side in case of bullous pemphigoid. In case of bullous pemphigoid, the antibodies are directed against the anchoring filaments, that is the collagen 17. Whereas in case of EBA, the antibody is directed against the anchoring fibrils, that is collagen 7. See, this is the basement membrane zone. It is composed of hemidesmosomes. After this hemidesmosomes, there is a lamina lucida. After this, there is lamina densa, and this is the subdensa zone. Sublamina densa zone. In case of EBA, antibodies are directed against this So you are seeing the immunofluorescence on the floor side of the blister, whereas in bullous pemphigoid, it is chiefly the roof side of the blister that shows immunofluorescence. To just show you the histopathology of bullous pemphigoid vis-a-vis EBA, this is a case of bullous pemphigoid. Here also you can see subepidermal blister, but more of a fibrin is present in the blister space with lot of inflammation. And here you can see it is relatively neat, but I will not hazard a guess on the diagnosis based on histopathology alone. I will always depend upon DIF to give you a conclusive diagnosis. And this particular, this inflammatory cells is present in particularly the inflammatory variant of EBA, which is a close differential diagnosis with bullous pemphigoid. And I must thank Dr. Abhishek Dey for sharing SOPs and giving significant inputs for standardizing the staining protocols in our immunofluorescence lab. We'll address the question and answers now.
Ma'am, we have questions in the chat box as well as in the Q&A section.
Yes, predominantly eosinophils are seen in bullous pemphigoid. Is there any festooning? Festooning of the lower layer of the roof, you mean? Can you please elaborate about this festooning? I'll answer the other question.
I think she is asking for festooning of dermal papillae, more of a features of porphyria cutinata tarda.
Okay. EBA also shows milia on healed lesions. Yes, EBA can also show milia on healed lesions. That is true. And milia can also be seen in case of bullous pemphigoid. How to diagnose EBA in resource poor setting? You'll have to refer it to a higher center, I think. Otherwise it's very difficult on histopathology alone to diagnose EBA.
Ma'am, can I just have a few points regarding the clinical differentiation?
Yes, definitely. Clinically, yes.
There are few clues I have given while I was presenting the case, like little bit of younger age than bullous pemphigoid normally. A second thing, you can have those in pressure prone areas. Most of the EBA cases are seen in mechanobullous areas, as if like epidermolysis bullosa congenita or hereditaria, which is we find in younger, and hill sweep scarring. Normally, bullous pemphigoid lesion doesn't hill sweep scarring. So these are the clinical clues. But the problem is, unless you have immunofluorescence, we often find it difficult to prove this. That's why we need this thing, because the prognosis is quite different between the two.
If we get a faint IgA in immunofluorescence study, should we repeat? No need of repeating, because the IgA, in addition to IgG, it will go more in favor of EBA. Actually, it is a correlation between clinical features, histopathological findings, and the DIF studies that will help you to arrive at a conclusive diagnosis. I think, Abhishek, you can answer this. How do you explain pustular lesion in EBA?
I think it can be a secondary lesions also, secondary bacterial infection.
Secondary infection.
So that can be ignored. EBA sometimes can have, however, hemorrhagic blisters. That is usually not seen in other type of, normally not seen in other type of blisters. EBA can sometimes have hemorrhagic blisters. So that can happen.
Yes, predominantly eosinophils are seen in bullous pemphigoid. That is another clue histologically. But then I would not give too much importance. I wouldn't hazard a guess based on the presence of eosinophils to say that this is bullous pemphigoid.
It's true that because BP has other variety also. There are possible variety of BP. There are variety where on mixed cell pattern also seen, and there is a variety of EBA which is mostly possible, but it can find a neutrophil rich variant of EBA also. So histopathologically is very difficult to differentiate between all this.
Please show neutrophil and how to identify them. Okay, you want me to go back? We'll get late otherwise.
Fever.
Okay. See, these are the neutrophils. They have got lobed nucleus and their cytoplasm stains eosinophilic in color. Eosinophils will be more brightly eosinophilic. If there is an adjacent eosinophil, you can make out the difference between the two cells. But here it is mostly neutrophils that are present here. There is no cell which is showing very bright pink color. Otherwise, I could have told you that this is an eosinophil. However, if you had seen my case of erythema multiforme, I had pointed out a eosinophil there. So that was the last question on this case, and we will move on to the next case. Shantanu, are you ready?
Yeah. Thank you, Shubhradi, to taking up this case. This young male patient visited me around 2 months back with an asymptomatic pigmented solid elevated lesion on his right shoulder with the sole purpose of getting it removed. This lesion had been present for last 7 to 8 years, according to him, which was slowly increasing in size, and on examination, a firm to hard hyperpigmented nodule of size approximately 2 to 2.5 centimeter was found. The lesion was fixed to the skin with very restricted mobility, and there was no surface change, and this was non-tender on palpation also. Apart from this, there were multiple skin tags which were present on his neck and axilla, and some post-inflammatory hyperpigmented spots were present all around his shoulders and back. So I would now like to go to the audience poll. This was the lesion. This is the clinical picture.
Maximum people thought it is the dermatofibroma. Epidermis here is showing hyperplasia. The retiridges are elongated and there is increased pigmentation, the other prominent pigmentation of the lower layer of the epidermis. See, the tips of the retiridges are showing very prominent pigmentation, and there is proliferation of again spindle cells in the dermis. We will look at the pattern of proliferation. Here, the typical story-form pattern of proliferation of fibroblasts is seen. Story-form is also a pinwheel pattern. It is actually a multicentric proliferation of fibroblasts that we are seeing here. So one is moving in this direction, one is going in this, one bundle is going in this. It resembles vaguely a pinwheel, and pathologists are fond of, labeling it to some object. So it is known as story-form or pinwheel pattern of proliferation. This is the lower border of the tumor. You can see that it is impinging on the subcutaneous fat. It has not infiltrated it. Here we can see some fascicular arrays of proliferating fibroblasts. The cells are spindle-shaped, mostly. Again, some pale staining cells are there with multinucleate giant cells here and there. So histiocytoid cells are also seen in this case, but mostly the cells are spindle-shaped fibroblasts. And some amount of lymphocytic infiltrate was also seen in the lesion. So with that, the diagnosis was made, but then I found an area which was very intriguing. This is a granuloma that you can see, a well-formed granuloma. In my previous cases, I couldn't show you any well-formed granuloma, but though this case shouldn't be having a granuloma, I saw a nicely formed granuloma in this case with a lot of Langhans giant cells and multinucleate giant cells, good smattering of multinucleate giant cells within the granuloma. Look at the peripheral arrangement of the nuclei. Langhans type of giant cells. These are epithelioid cells. And plenty of lymphocytes were also present in one focus. Some plasma cells can be made out, mostly lymphocytes. The darkly stained cells are mostly lymphocytes, and there are few histiocytes also. So when I found this granuloma, I immediately went ahead with 2 special stains, the ZN to look for AFB bacilli. There were none. PASTN also was non-contributory. I gave out a diagnosis of dermatofibroma, but I had a talk with my referring doctor regarding the presence of granuloma. Dermatofibroma are common benign lesions of skin. There is controversy regarding its pathogenesis. Some people consider it to be neoplastic, whereas others consider it to be reactive. Very often there is history of preceding trauma, which can be elicited if you take a proper history, which points towards its reactive nature. In our case, interesting history was revealed by the patient, which will be revealed by Dr. Shayantani.
Yes, so when Shubhradi talked to me regarding this particular feature, which was very unexpected, and then I again called up the patient and I inquired him more intricately. So actually he told that he used to have plenty of acne on his back, and one of such lesions, according to him, because it was around 9 years back, he could recall in that way only. One of such lesions on his right shoulder was not resolving, and he used to do regular picking and meddling. He used to meddle with the lesion, and later on he found that it became pigmented and it remained as such, and it was gradually increasing in size. It was very small initially, like an acne, and later it started increasing in size, and he thought it must have been some mole or something like that, and he just left it. And since it was increasing and in size gradually, he came to me for removal. So this was something which I could elicit from the patient. Apart from that, nothing significant or any other history could be revealed. So this could be something that we can speculate regarding the trauma factor.
So probably that granuloma was a foreign body granuloma. He must have used something to prick at it, actually. That is what I concluded. Did anyone inject talc? Maybe. So that the granuloma could be in response to the talc that was injected. Very good. Okay, it's Dr. Rajiv Sharma. Only you can think of something like that. Any other questions? Okay, we move on to the next question then. Next case then. Plenty of RBC can be hemosiderotic. I didn't find plenty of RBC in this case. No, it was not hemosiderotic dermatofibroma. We move on to the next case. Okay. Dr. Aarti is ready, I can see.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I shall be presenting the 7th case of the day. A 58-year-old female presented with asymptomatic lesions over the trunk and extremities. She had no comorbidities and there was no other significant history. So in this left-hand side photograph, we can see some skin-colored papules over the lower back. Can we see the photo again? Can we see the previous slide? Yes. And in the right half, we can see some skin-colored papules over the abdomen. Next slide, please. So in this photograph, we can see, yes. So in this photo, we can see some shiny skin-colored papules which are coalesced to form a plug over the dorsum of left hand. And on the right-hand side photograph, we can see some shiny hyperpigmented papules over the volar aspect of the wrist. Next slide, please. So this is the close-up view where we can see the annular plug over the left hand, and even the right hand shows multiple skin-colored shiny papules. So given the clinical findings, let us have an audience poll.
Almost equally divided between eruptive xanthoma and granuloma annulare. We will see what the histopathology revealed. So in the scanner view itself, you can see that there is a zone of something abnormal in the dermis. Okay. So this abnormal region is actually degenerated collagen, pinkish areas, and it is surrounded by, bordered by these palisaded arrangement of histiocytes. The palisaded granuloma is very typical of this case. The histiocytes, they have got vesicular nuclei, and the collagen fibers appear degenerated, they are pale stained, they appear fragmented, and you can see these histiocytes, they are called palisaded because they border the degenerated collagen which is present in the center and almost are arranged parallel to one another. Look at the parallel arrangement. So anything which is parallel in arrangement, we call them palisaded. There is a collection of lymphocytes over here. A larger aggregate of lymphocytes surrounding few epithelioid cells here. A special stain revealed, special stain for Alcian blue revealed this bluish material which is nothing but mucin. So the diagnosis was granuloma annulare, and because of its presentation, it is the generalized form of granuloma annulare. Histologically, it is the same as the localized form, and clinically, this generalized form is more common in elderly patients. On the trunk, forearms, near joints, extensor aspects of elbow. It is more commonly associated with diabetes. Necrobiosis lipoidica diabeticorum is an important differential diagnosis histologically. It can be differentiated quite reliably because of its tired pattern of granuloma. There are more number of foreign body giant cells, and it has got plenty of plasma cells in addition to the lymphocytes, by which it can be differentiated from granuloma annulare, as well as the clinical presentation is different. So we'll try to answer the queries, if any. What is the hallmark of a palisading granuloma? I just mentioned while showing it. So I hope you paid attention when I was showing the bordering of the degenerated collagen by the histiocytes. Chat. Any other questions? We move on to the next case. Dr. Sukanya, are you ready?
Yes. Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Wisdom, and thank you, Shubhradi, for giving me the opportunity to present my case here. So this is a elderly female. She presented me almost, came to my clinic 1 month back, and she presented with this slightly elevated round, almost round, you can say, growth on the medial aspect of the right nasolabial fold. It had a stuck-on appearance onto this, and patient's history was mainly that It is present from a very long time, but there has been a recent increase in size and growth of the lesion from past 6 months. She wasn't much bothered about it, but 2 weeks back before presenting, she had severe pain and inflammation on the squarey mole that she said that she was having a mole. So there was pain and inflammation of the mole as well as on the surrounding tissue as well was greatly inflamed. So patient was treated by a local physician with antibiotics. The inflammation subsided. Now she wanted a treatment for this, or wanted to know more about the mole. If you see closely, you can see some skin tags on the chin, and I think there is another photo. Next slide, please. Yeah, there, if you see closely, there are some skin tags on the chin area. Some are warty looking. There are also some lesions were there on the neck. There is also some lesions on the nose. There was one intradermal nevus as well. So what we did is patient was not very keen on getting an excision surgery done. So I did a punch biopsy on this. And let's take an audience poll on the probable diagnosis, please.
Maximum people thought it to be a seborrheic keratosis. So let's see what the histopathology revealed. This is the scanner view. And here itself, you can see there are basaloid islands in the dermis, which are infiltrating the dermis. Though, yes, at one place it is even dropping off from the lower epidermis. Basaloid islands of tumor cells. The epidermis is slightly atrophic here and is showing irregular thickening on this side. It is not a very even epidermis. So the biggest basaloid island that you saw, this is the low power view of the same. Here you can see a collection of pigmented cells, which are nothing but, again, melanophages. See the nice palisaded arrangement of the peripheral cells in this tumor island. So I just described in my previous case, the term palisade is used whenever cells are present in parallel arrangement, parallel to each other. The peripheral row is palisaded, whereas the inner cells are showing some, they are growing in different directions actually. And all the cells look pretty basaloid. They look dark in color. They have scanty cytoplasm. These are some irregular nests that are infiltrating the dermis. There is a relationship with the stroma. The stroma looks myxoid in nature and it is arranged around the tumor nests. It is very typical of this condition. I shall reveal the diagnosis. Here you can see little bit of a squamoid change in this nest, slightly squamoid change. This is another area where again a tumor island of basaloid cells. Look at the cells, they have ill-defined cell borders, and the peripheral layer is showing nice palisaded arrangement, whereas there is disarray of the cells in the center. Nuclear atypia can be appreciated. Some are slightly larger nuclei, but then marked nuclear pleomorphism is not a feature of this particular case. You can see a mitotic figure over here. Pigmented cells over here. This is the parakeratotic pearl. So the diagnosis was basal cell carcinoma. It was not seborrheic keratosis. Seborrheic keratosis is benign and basal cell carcinoma is a malignant condition. I included this picture. See how similar it is to the case, to the clinical appearance of the lesion, which was showed by Dr. Sukanya. This case was shown in my last DP summit. And this is actually a case of seborrheic keratosis, how similar it looks. So it is extremely important to take a biopsy and do a proper histopathological examination. Basal cell carcinoma is one of the most common skin malignancies. Early diagnosis confers excellent prognosis as it is completely curable with surgery. and it needs to be differentiated from other pigmented, benign, and malignant tumors, both clinically as well as histologically. And seborrheic keratosis, mind you, is a clinical differential diagnosis as well as a histological differential diagnosis. Many beginners in pathology can misdiagnose a basal cell carcinoma as seborrheic keratosis if they are not careful. We'll address the questions. Okay, somebody is asking, how is Dr. Abhishek? Abhishek is quite hale and hearty. He's presenting. Any questions pertaining to this particular case will be addressed? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next. If you ask questions, it becomes very interactive, actually. Though I think we can move on to the next case now because Dr. Shantanu is probably waiting. If there are no questions, we'll move on to the next case. Dr. Shomuduti Chandra. This is the last case of this webinar.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Shomuduti Chandra, and thank you, Wisdom and Shubhra ma'am, for giving me the opportunity to share this case with all. So, yes, so this 24-year-old young lady had presented with a history of recurrent painful nodules and nodulo-ulcerative lesions in both the groins since around 1.5 years. The lesions used to start as papules, increased in size to deep-seated nodules, which finally progressed to some pustules and ulceration, sometimes with a draining of pus and sometimes with a little blood-tinged discharge. The old lesions healed with scarring and hyperpigmentation. And this was the presentation when she had presented to me. On further query, she gave a history of low-grade fever, mostly evening rise, with anorexia and weight loss. And initial biopsy was done in 2019, where it revealed non-specific chronic inflammation, no granuloma, no AFB, and she was treated with various antibiotics for a prolonged period of time without much benefit. The Mantu this time was done and it came as 7 mm, and still I decided to biopsy this lesion, and this exactly the lesion that was biopsied this time, and Shubhra ma'am had interpreted the case.
We'll have the audience poll first. 9% thought that it is scrofuloderma. Maximum people thought that it is scrofuloderma.
Stop sharing the results.
So this was the biopsy. Look at the epidermis and the dermis, lot of inflammation in the dermis, and there appears to be some opening through the epidermis. You can make out a lot of mononuclear inflammatory cells. There is vague circumscription, vague granuloma formation, you can call them, and some giant cells are present here. Lot of edema is present. These gaps, they are due to edema in the dermis. So again, histiocytes, lymphocytes, few plasma cells, there is vague granuloma formation along with Langerhans giant cells. You can see multinucleate giant cell over here, few plasma cells. More of the same. more plasma cells can be seen in this particular focus. See, all these are plasma cells with eccentric nuclei. All these are plasma cells. Lot of lymphocytes, histiocytes, few multinuclear giant cells. Special stain for ZN to look for AFP was done. And like the majority of you, I signed out this case as scrofuloderma. Mantoux test is quite important in this case. Shomoduti, will you elaborate on the Mantoux test?
Yes, so Mantoux test was performed and the result that was given by the lab as negative with an induration of 7 mm.
Normally, when induration is more than 10 millimeter, a lab reports the Mantoux as positive.
Yes.
Normally, it is the case.
So there are certain situations where a induration of more than 5 mm should be considered a positive test result. In a case of HIV or immunocompromised compromised patient, where the serology of this patient was done, but the serology was non-reactive. A person with a recent contact with an active TB patient, a patient having a nodular or fibrotic changes on chest X-ray, which is consistent with an old healed TB, and patients with organ transplant or any other immunosuppressive. Now, this patient, all the serology came as negative. The chest X-ray was perfectly fine, but on further inquiry, the patient gave a history of contact with an active pulmonary TB patient in the family, who was positive since 1.5 years and was undergoing treatment.
Okay. So this form of cutaneous tuberculosis, that is scrofuloderma, is often missed or diagnosed quite late due to resemblance with other skin disorders. Clinical differential diagnoses include hidradenitis suppurativa, fistula, actinomycosis, etc. A biopsy can often help in early diagnosis. How would atypical mycobacteria infection have looked histopathologically? Atypical mycobacteria will also cause granuloma formation. Not very well defined. Sometimes serpiginous granulomas can be found in case of atypical mycobacterial infection, but it's very difficult to actually distinguish it on histopathology alone. No, AFB was not seen. AFB was non-contributory in this case. Though in scrofuloderma, it is one of those cutaneous tuberculous forms where you expect to see AFB. But unfortunately, in this case, I did not find any AFB. On HP of, could you elaborate on HP of HS? Dr. Nina Madnani, HS. What is the full form of HS?
Hidradenitis suppurativa.
Okay, okay. Dermatologists use a lot of short forms and sometimes I'm quite flummoxed by them. Okay. Hidradenitis suppurativa will not have granuloma formation, and it will have a lot of neutrophils along with histiocytes. And Langhans giant cells probably are not probably. Langhans giant cells are not seen in hidradenitis suppurativa. Granuloma is not particularly seen in hidradenitis suppurativa. Moreover, it is more common in the armpits. Bilateral lesion, can you please explain? Shomoduti, were the lesions bilateral? Shomoduti, were the lesions bilateral?
Yes, but it had old heel scars on the right groin. When the patient recently presented, like 1 or 2 months ago, she had lesion on only one groin. Since she was having it for the past 1.5 years, she's been having one or odd lesions on both the groins.
I have, Dr. Ritu is asking how to differentiate this from hidradenitis suppurativa. More of suppuration is a feature of hidradenitis suppurativa. More of neutrophils. And it will also have apocrine glands in the section because it is an inflammation of the apocrine glands. Could you allow? Okay. So hidradenitis is a type of apocrine folliculitis inflammation. How much PPD was used? 5 or 10? Was it repeated with 10 units?
5.
5. Okay. Dr. Rajiv Sharma was asking. Okay. Dr. Devika has wished good night. Thank you for attending. How about lymphadenopathic and early FNAC would help? Yes, definitely. Because scrofulioderma usually occurs when an underlying lymph node bursts and the inflammation spreads into the dermis, and from the dermis there is a discharging sinus is formed in case of scrofulioderma. FNAC would definitely help because you can see nice granuloma on cytology. You can also do a ZN stain on cytology, which will help you to make a diagnosis. FNAC is definitely of help. AFP was negative on ZN stain. Mantu was negative. Still to be considered as scrofulioderma. But sometimes your stain may not be contributory. When the bacilli load is not that high, AFP can become negative. And Mantu was negative. Yes, Shomoditi just explained the significance of 7 millimeter Mantu. However, sometimes the patient may have some inherent energy and Mantu may not be positive in spite of the patient being positive for tubercle bacilli. In our country, actually, we can clinicians even do empirical treatment even if they do not have any lab evidence of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. They do empirical treatment. Sometimes the patient's response to empirical treatment, thereby proving that the patient had tuberculosis.
Ma'am, there are few other questions in the Q&A section.
Okay. Dr. Neena Madnani, sorry for short forms. Okay. I'm also learning. Yes, we also see hidradenitis in groins. Yes, we also see hidradenitis in groins, but I told you that the vague granuloma formation with a lot of Langhans giant cells made me favor the diagnosis of scrofulioderma in this particular case. And probably the patient responded to anti-tubercular treatment. Shomodati?
The patient is already on the 4-drug regimen.
Okay, and is responding?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes, you have to take the feedback from the clinician to know whether your diagnosis was correct in the first place. Dr. Rajiv Sharma, was a colonoscopy done? Okay, to rule out Crohn's disease, you mean, or to rule out tuberculosis of the GI? Colonoscopy was done, Dr. Shomodati?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did she have any GI symptoms?
No.
Okay. Clinical outcome, Dr. Shomodati has already answered. Did you go for the culture of mycobacteria? I think in this particular case, a culture for TB bacteria culture would help, Shomodati.
Yeah, it could have.
It could have. Before starting the treatment, a TB bacteria culture could have been sent to the lab. Okay. Dr. Rajiv Sharma is saying that hidradenitis suppurativa is no longer believed to be apocrinitis. That is a learning for me. And sometimes This apocrine glands are not present in the biopsy, in the punch biopsy that I receive in the lab. If the clinical features are mentioned and I find a lot of neutrophils along with histiocytes and the clinical history of multiple discharging sinuses are present, I do give a report of hidradenitis suppurativa without finding any apocrine glands. Was a CT done to look for other lymph nodes? Can we use PCR to detect? PCR gives a lot of fallacious results in our country because all of us are exposed to Mycobacterium tubercle bacilli, and I do not really depend on the PCR test to tell me whether there is active tuberculous infection or not. And sometimes even a dead bacilli can produce a positive PCR test. On the tissue. On the tissue, PCR could have been sent, but again, a PCR cannot really differentiate between dead and live bacillus. Culture is the gold standard actually. A TB bacteric culture would be of more help.
Okay, ma'am.
What really rules out atypical mycobacteriosis? The culture should be the gold standard. Okay, we have come to the end of the presentation now. We have finished just on time. And I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all my co-presenters for sparing their valuable time, and to the wonderful audience for your active participation.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, may we please go on to the next slide, the thank you slide?
Okay. Yes, this is very important.
Thank you, dear doctors, for joining us this evening.
Orpita,
Yes,
just a
ma'am.
second. The
Yes,
last slide is actually very important.
Yes, ma'am.
This hand holding actually depicts the hand holding between the pathologist and the clinician. It is always a hand holding that actually leads to the correct diagnosis. Hand holding between the clinician and the pathologist is a must for properly diagnosing all the patients. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rightly put, ma'am, very appropriately put. Thank you again, dear doctors, for your active participation for this session and for making it as interactive as you have. I would also like to thank our esteemed panelists, Dr. Shrudeep Ghosh sir, Dr. Abhishek De, Dr. Shantani Chakraborty, Dr. Aarti Sarda, Dr. Sukanya ma'am, and Dr. Shomaduti ma'am, as well as, though Dr. Kaushik Laidi could not attend, but still, thanks for his case. Last but not the least, definitely our chief pathologist of the session, our chief speaker, Dr. Shubhra Dhar. Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an elevated and engaging session. Thank you to Shonjit Ghosh, who had taken care of the IT part of the entire session. Thank you once again, all the doctors, for the participation. I hope we all had a great evening. By this, we would be closing the session today. Thank you so much, and advance Happy New Year to everyone. Till we meet again.
Thank you. Thank you, Arpita.